All right, just give it a second or two. Welcome, everyone. I'm very pleased today to be joined by Bruce Burnworth, who needs no introduction on the Tesla Twitter side of things, but I'm very happy to have him on the channel to also talk about Palantir. So thank you for joining me today, Bruce. I would like to ask you first if you could give yourself a bit of an introduction on the Tesla side of things for my viewers who may have not have heard of you. I was just looking today, looking back at the article that was written, that that famous 2020 rise in Tesla stock. So could you kind of just give a very brief background on what happened there and kind of before even the recent Tesla times?
Yeah, sure. Just a brief background going kind of back to the beginning of my Tesla experience. In 2017, I read an article by Tony Seba, and it was talking about EVs and full self-driving. And I read that article and I was convinced that that was going to be the future. And basically in 2017, I could see that by 2027, in 10 years from then, that regular ICE vehicles that don't drive themselves would be non-existent as far as sales go. They're still going to be on the road, but they're not going to be sold anymore. And so I thought, okay, it's a little bit early to be investing in Tesla or to buy a Tesla at that point. But a year later, in 2018, I bought a Model 3. And then about a year after that, in 2019, about June or so, I started investing in Tesla. And at that point, my investments in Tesla were all pretty much, well, 90% of them were long-term call options, most of them leaps, and then 10% were shorter term. So basically, I was dividing it up. So I was, at least the way I saw it, the 90% that were longer term leaps had very little risk associated with them. And the shorter term leaps or shorter term call options had a lot of risk associated with them, but a lot of opportunity as well.
Yeah.
So it turned out that, just as an example, one of those riskier call options that I had, I put in $23,000 into it. And in August of 2020, it was worth $1.8 million. So that was like the best one that I had, best performing 8 months, with I think an 1,100% return or something like that in 11 months. So that was pretty cool. The rest of them did well, but not that well. And then in was it May of 2020, April, May time period, I ended up saying, hey, Tesla is way down. This is ridiculous. There's no reason why Tesla should be down because of the coronavirus. So I sold my home at a below market value and invested another sum of money into call options, kind of the same 90-10 split. So at that point in time, I had quite a bit of money invested into Tesla call options, and it all kind of skyrocketed, and I ended up in 2021 with about a 50x on my initial investment. And then I said, okay, what can I do to do with this money? I way past what I needed for retirement. I was way past what I needed to help my family, buy houses or whatever. And so then I said, okay, I've spent my entire career as a civil engineer making the world better one community at a time. Let's see what I can do to keep doing that. And I started helping out small businesses. And then I started helping out some farmers. And I said, well, these farmers really need some help. And so I did some research and I found David Johnson, who had came up with this idea and had been researching it for 15 years, looking at how to increase the biology in the soil. So the bacteria and the fungi in the soil in order to increase crop yields and also to pull carbon out of the air, pull the carbon dioxide out of the air and put it in the ground. So that's kind of my short story of where I came from and where I'm at with Tesla.
Yeah. So just circling back on the Tesla, you talked 90-10 split on the options, right? But was your driving principle and I think I've heard this from you before on some interviews that you've done, just to acquire more shares, right? You to exercise the options and perhaps using margin to purchase the full 100 shares, right? Was your driving principle to acquire, or was it to kind of just build wealth from the options?
So at first, when I started buying the options, it was a 90-10 split, and it was kind of like, okay, I'm doing these options, I'll make money off the options. Not too much thought went into it. As
Okay.
far as the taxes and tax implications, well, when, for example, my 23,000 turned in $1.8 million, I said, wait a second, I have to pay like short-term taxes on this, and this is going to be, like 50 something percent of it needs to go to taxes. That's ridiculous. So then I started searching around, and I found that by exercising the options into stock and and going that direction, I could avoid the income taxes. And I thought, well, how can I do that? I can't come up with all this money. And then I figured out a way to incrementally exercise the stock. So I sold or exercised the options into stock. So I sold a few call options, had the cash, used that cash to buy stock. And then once I had that stock, I was able to do margin borrowing against the stock and exercise more options into stock, which gave me then more stock to borrow against. And I was able to incrementally exercise almost all of those options that I had. I had to pay some income tax on some of it, but that was allowing me to avoid the income tax. And then borrow. So first of all, exercising options into stock is a non-taxable event, and borrowing on margin is a non-taxable event. So then I started thinking, well, I should just do this for everything. And so what I started doing was, okay, I'm just going to accumulate stock, and that way I'll be able to borrow against that to do everything that I need to do. And that's where I am today. Basically, I've exercised almost all of my options except for those first few that I had to sell in order to start this ball rolling.
Yeah.
And I use margin to exercise the options. I use margin to borrow to buy more options. I use margin to help my daughter buy a house. I use margin for basically everything. And while I have a lot of margin borrowing right now, it's also because of Tesla going up recently, it's there's quite a bit of comfort in that. For the last 8 months or 9 months, it was kind of touch and go. And it took some real thinking in order to figure out how to not have to sell any options or stock in order to hold on to it all. But I did figure it out, and here I am.
Yeah, so I love the thought of the strategy, right? And obviously it's been working incredibly well for you. But just at a high level, options and margin and the way that you're doing it in that sort of cycle where like the flywheel, you'll like continue to accumulate. That seems like it would only work if the stock you're actually doing this on continues to grow, right? And there's
Yeah.
not a downward cycle, obviously, where you could get burned if, well, it sounds like obviously that's happened to Tesla, but it's only been like a short kind of sell off and then a recovery. But if Tesla were to, and you said by now you have enough of a margin of safety, but if someone's doing this and Tesla kind of falls off, huge sell off or something terrible happens to the company, like there's not much there's not much safety there, right?
Yeah, so I had that situation. I think the worst one was in May, maybe of this year, where the stock was down in the 500 range,
Yeah.
and I received a margin call, a house margin call, and I was able to deal with that by exercising more of my options into stock, so I had more stock to cover it. But then immediately went into a federal margin call.
Uh,
So then I had to figure out how to deal with that. And I worked with Schwab, my broker, and figured out that I didn't want to risk having any of my stock called because then I had to pay a huge amount of income tax on it. So we worked out something where I could sell options on base supported by my options. So I had long-term options, and I could sell some options to people based on those long-term options, which if, everything went south, then, they would get those options and I'd be out those options. But that was a whole lot better than risking selling stock. And so I did that. As soon as Tesla went back up in a few weeks, then I was able to buy back those options, and now I'm back to where I was.
Wow.
So, but I do want to emphasize that using options and using margin is a very risky thing to do. And you want to be sure that you know what you're doing. And part of the way that I got to that point of being comfortable with this is I lost $800,000 in the 2012 time period doing options. And that was a very expensive learning process. But the only people that I know of that have been successful using options are the people that have gone through that type of experience and learned from it. And so it's a very expensive process to learn.
Yeah.
And I have a pinned tweet on my Twitter feed that talks about what you need to do in order to effectively use options. You have to be able to know how much the stock is going to go up and when the stock is going to go up that much. Most people say that is completely impossible. You can't do that. And I agree from a day-to-day standpoint or a week-to-week or even a month-to-month. You can't do that. And that's why I focus primarily on long-term options like a year or more, is because there's a little bit more certainty that things will go up, especially with Tesla. And the other thing is just to do a lot of research and understand like Tesla stock completely, understand all the influences and impacts. I spent more than 10,000 hours studying Tesla and figuring out, what the ins and outs are and developing what I call a well-honed intuition that it's not just here's the facts and here's the facts, but, an intuition related to those facts. And so that has helped me a lot in being able to deal with this. And unless somebody is willing to put in that type of time and effort and thinking, then I would not suggest that you try options or margin borrowing because they're very risky.
Yeah. So I really like the idea of kind of splitting it up between leaps and shorter term options. But when you talk about, and let's see if I can actually, I will just share it quickly if I can, your pinned tweet, because I think that's very good context for this discussion. So you say, and this works for any stock, right? Know how much it's going to go up and when. That's basically what options are, right? And know, yeah, so you know how you need to understand the fundamentals and principles of call options and be able to demonstrate, yeah, that you can do both of those
Right.
before probably making a big bet, right? Um, yeah, yeah. So that's pretty much what you were just saying. But what I want to ask is on the short term, right? You don't like long term, you could say we'll probably have a general trend. Factories are pumping out cars. Like there are so many positive catalysts. But in the short term, kind of what is your mindset? What are you thinking? Is it catalysts or is it like technicals? Like what are you using on these short term to, as you say, know where the stock is going to go?
Yeah, so let's back up a little bit. For the longer term, my whole premise with investing in Tesla is that EVs will replace ICE vehicles, and that full self-driving will replace manual driving, and
Mhm.
that the only company that is really doing that effectively is Tesla. And so that is the basis for a lot of my thinking and all associated with Tesla and the stock. So that's my basis. And then I look at the details. And when you start getting, that takes care of like out, years. Because as that happens, for example, Tesla right now says they'll be making 10 million cars in 2030 or by 2030. And I look at that and say, there is going to be so much demand for Teslas that they're going to have to accelerate that, and they're going to have to make those 10 million cars a year earlier than that. And I think it'll be closer to 2025, 2026 that they'll be making 10 million cars a day. or 10 million cars a year, sorry. Um, and that's based on the level of demand. And right now, for example, in the last quarterly call, Tesla said they were surprised by the level of demand. Well, they're going to be surprised and more surprised and more surprised as time goes on, especially when they come out with a $25,000 car that not only will it be cheaper for a life cycle cost to buy an EV, but it'll be cheaper to buy it, and then it'll be much, much cheaper to have a life cycle cost associated with it. So that's kind of what my background thinking associated with it.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the shorter term is more of a, and that's where the intuition part comes in, is how is the market going to react to various things? And how is the market, for example, going to react to an EV credit, or how is the market going to react to, what happens with the economy? How is it going to react to a bunch of different things? And this next week, what I'm looking at is how is it going to react when there's a gamma squeeze and the stock goes way up. Well, is it going to go way up because of the gamma squeeze? So this is, I've kind of transitioned, and let me back up a little bit and describe this. So I talked about my 90-10 approach with call options. So 90% long-term, fairly less risky options, and 10% risky. I've now transitioned that, and because of all the stock call options that I've exercised into stock, now I'm 90% stock and 10% options. And then within those 10% options, I have most of them longer term. I bought them longer term. Now they're getting to be shorter term. For example, some of them expire in January and February, January, March, and June of next year. But they were bought as leaps when I bought them. And then kind of the next stage of that is taking a small percentage of that and putting it into weekly call options associated with this gamma squeeze.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you about that. And of course, we want to talk about Palantir, and I was going to open your website after that. But yeah, so the gamma squeeze. So I had seen the video, the Dave Lee, I forget the guest's name, but
Brent. Yep.
about Brent. Yeah. Yeah. Dave has some great stuff, great guests. So my interpretation of it was what happened on Monday was a gamma squeeze, if you want to call it that. And there's the possibility of one happening next Monday, right? So kind of what are you looking for? And it sounded like you had been kind of accumulating some weekly options for, was it November 5th expiry next week?
Right. Yeah, so what I learned from that interview and then did some more research on is that basically a gamma squeeze is a week-long event. And so on Monday, you end up, or you have a bunch of people buying options. And because those people are buying options, the market makers who are selling those options need to buy stock to support it. Well, if the stock value goes up, then, and it could be that they only need to buy, maybe for 3 options that they sell, maybe they only need to buy 1 stock to cover it. But as the stock goes up, then they need to buy more stock in order to cover it. And buying more stock in a situation like that ends up driving the price up because there's a limited amount of stock available. And so the idea is more and more people buy call options. The market makers have to buy more and more stock to cover it. And the stock goes up, and then it is just this cycle that gets out of control. And that's why the prices go way up. What we saw last week was the prices went way up. And to most people's surprise, it did not go back down. It kept going up. And what's happening there is it's not a gamma squeeze so much anymore. Gamma squeeze accelerates the rise, but it doesn't hold it at that level. What holds it there is that people look at the stock and say, hey, wait a second, this is a good stock. It's got a good future. It's got good fundamentals. And yeah, it's worth it. And then they hold on to it and they look at it more as a momentum stock, and they're buying it because of that. And that's what happened kind of at the end of the week, was you ended up seeing that momentum purchases and more people wanting to get into it, and a little bit of FOMO probably.
Yeah. So that's interesting. I was kind of thinking we saw the after hours action on Friday could market makers, and because the stock was up over 1% after hours, I was just wondering if maybe market makers were kind of buying in after hours, anticipating this, or maybe that's too
Yeah.
far.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how they deal with this, because I imagine the market makers are pretty knowledgeable on what happens in a gamma squeeze,
Yeah.
and they're looking at it and saying, okay, how can I deal with this? And yeah, what you're saying could be part of it is, hey, in order to reduce the gamma squeeze next week, maybe I should buy now.
Yeah. Well, it'll be very interesting to see. I mean, Tesla's already probably one of the most talked about stocks in the last few weeks, of course. And it's an interesting dynamic because now it is such a large company, right? We saw earlier in the year, of course, GME, AMC, all these other meme stocks. When they have a much smaller market cap, I think it's easier for these sorts of kind of actions to take place, right? But with a company as big as Tesla, do you ever wonder if maybe it can't go as fast as you think these other gamma squeezes have before?
Yeah, Tesla is really unique, I think, with regard to having a gamma squeeze, because the other stocks that have gamma squeezes typically it's because it's basically manipulation. The retail investors go in and buy a whole bunch of call options, and then the market has to respond to it, and there's not much really there. But with
Yeah.
Tesla, there's substance associated with it. It's a big company. It's not going anyplace. It's making money. Its profits are increasing. It's making more and more cars. It's growing over 50% per year. And so there's a lot there going for it, which is quite different from other gamma squeezes. So it is interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So just last thing, any predictions? Because I think tomorrow and for the rest of the week, it's just while I have you here, I've seen some of your tweets about it. You were expecting, I think, 1,200 on Monday, and then anything beyond that, of course, speculation, and I'm not going
Yeah,
to take
so
any action.
I'm I'm looking at, because of the gamma squeeze and because of the good fundamentals and the momentum move in the stock. I would say Monday it's 1150 easily, and by Friday over 1200, and it very well could be much more than that. And
Yeah.
on Thursday, I think it was Thursday, yeah, Thursday I bought some November 5th call options at, I think it was 1050 maybe, or 1150, I don't remember, 1150 maybe. And so they were up 75% by Friday, 2 days later. And I expect them to 2 or 3x by the end of the week. And at first I bought these thinking, okay, this would just be a call option thing, and I'll buy the call options and sell them. And now I'm looking at it and saying, well, maybe I want to exercise some of those. We'll see how it goes. So it could be that I do a combination of selling some of them, making profit, and some of them I exercise into stock. Well, let's see.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. So I do want to ask you about Palantir. We know a lot of Tesla investors have kind of heard of the company, like the culture, have seen the growth, seen the numbers. I just think there's something unique about Palantir that Tesla investors connect with. So I'm wondering, when did you first hear about Palantir and what kind of brought you in? I want to learn more, and then I want to become an investor.
Yeah, so I don't know when I first heard about Palantir, but probably the substances of hearing about Palantir was from Dave Lee's interview, our discussion with Emmett Peppers maybe about Palantir. And anyway, he was on Dave Lee's channel, and I said, that looks interesting. AI, the future is really AI, so maybe I should look into this. So I looked into it. At first, when I looked into it, I said, wait a second, Palantir is doing all this stuff with the federal government. They're doing defense work. And yeah, it's not really my thing. And so I backed off. And then later on, I saw somebody else's YouTube video about it. And I came to the conclusion that, wait a second, Palantir is doing things to make the world better, similar to what Tesla is doing. And they're just doing it in a different way. They're not producing EVs. They're basically using AI to make the world more secure, first of all, with working with the Defense Department. And if they didn't do that, then somebody else may not do it, and we'd have a worse situation as far as terrorism goes. But they're able to take AI basically at the edge. That's the way I look at it. And they're able to analyze that information and draw conclusions from it, which has been very helpful with deterring terrorists. And now they are using it to help large corporations. And they're now taking it down to smaller companies and startups. And I can see a situation in the future, not too distant future, where they're able to take that and bring it down to your own, personal level. Basically, right now, for example, you use Google and you do a Google search. Well, what you do in a Google search is you find a website that maybe has something of what you're looking for. Well, if Palantir goes all the way down to that level, you could do an AI on a personal level and ask a question of the internet through Palantir, and you could get the answer, not a possible place you could look to get the answer, but you could get the answer from AI looking at all the information that's on the web and drawing conclusions and providing you the answer. And that would be huge. And I don't think very many people are looking at that, but I can see that in the future of Palantir.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if that's something they've talked about before. Have you heard any commentary on a future kind of products like that?
So one thing's interesting. I heard this is a few years ago now, I guess, that kind of stuck with me. But ARK Invest, and I think it was their chief research person. He basically said, you don't get an advantage if you just listen to what the company says and then invest based on the company, because everybody else listens to what the company says and invests based on what the company says. And so what they do is they look at the trends, they look at where the company might go, what the company might be thinking about, and they look at that and say, this would be really a good investment if they actually do that, and the likelihood of them doing it is very high. So no, I have not heard anything from Palantir about getting down to that level of AI and helping the individual, but where they're going with it and what they can do fits perfectly with that concept of providing AI to individuals.
Yeah, yeah. So for anyone interested, this I think is a great page on Palantir's website. It's palantir.com/offerings, and I saw this when they released their crypto offering, but this pretty much gives a very good list of all of the things that their platforms can do, right? AI and machine learning. I saw you were tweeting about kind of AI at the edge,
Yep.
meaning that that's when all the processing is done locally, I believe, which is what Palantir strives for, to be
Yeah,
able to.
what I look at with AI at the edge is, and this my understanding of it is that Palantir doesn't need to have all of the data and information in their hands and in their software. They don't need to collect it all and then analyze it. What they do is they go out and they look at the data that's out at the edge, and they're able to not take that data, but they're able to look at it and draw conclusions from it within their software in order to figure out what needs to happen. So, and that's critical. For example, with the Defense Department, they have high security information that you can't take from one place and move to another. So they just look at it where it is, and they were able to draw conclusions based on that without moving the data. And that's the same type of thing. That to me is basically AI at the edge.
Yeah, yeah. And then just kind of looking at the rest of this list here, anti-money laundering, which they actually have now kind of pushed to a downstream product, as you were saying. They've developed Foundry, which really can do everything that you could ask for an operating system for the enterprise. That's what all of their R&D dollars have gone to. And now they're working on Foundry for Builders, Foundry for Crypto, undoubtedly more down market products, and anti-money laundering is one of the pieces that enables the Foundry for Crypto to happen. And yeah, I mean, it just keeps going here, which is I don't know. Did you have you been following the news about builders and the newest announcement of crypto? And did you have any thoughts there?
I'm not too much into crypto. I appreciate that it's a new way of dealing with uh, funds and value and all that. But frankly, I got my hands full with Tesla, and then I have a little tiny bit, in Palantir and a little bit into BioNTech. So I haven't really done much with crypto except recognize that there is value there and lots of people are interested in it.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, then let me just ask you, since this kind of correlates back to Palantir, because we're speculating as investors that they might adopt Bitcoin on the balance sheet or some other crypto eventually, much like Tesla has. What do you think about a business kind of doing that and becoming correlated to a digital asset when really that's not the norm yet?
I, when Tesla did it, they put some money into Bitcoin, and I thought that was fine. They did research and they made that decision, and I think it's good. I don't do it myself, but that doesn't mean that it's not good for other people to do.
Yeah,
So I really don't have that much to say on crypto, just because I haven't worked on it that much.
sure, sure.
And the reason that I don't is I see crypto as somewhat speculative. But what I like about Tesla and Palantir and others is you're investing in a company that is doing real good and real benefit to the world. And that's what I like to do. And so it's more just a personal desire. I'm not in this just to make money. I'm in this to help the world. And part of that is making money so I can help the world even more.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, there's Edge AI, Energy, and then their newest kind of announcements here. But I will put this link in the chat because I think it is a great place to go for anyone else interested. And now I want to pull up your site here so you can explain and talk more about. Let's see, just give me 1 second. Open this Chrome tab.
Yeah, well, while you're pulling that up, I can give a little bit of background. I gave a little bit already, but
Yeah,
kind of tying all this together, which is kind of interesting, is Tesla. Well, my whole career built up to investing in Tesla. I did transportation and engineering. I did civil engineering. I invested in Intel and Micron, which gave me a lot of background into tech type things. And so all of that kind of fit together with investing in Tesla. And then I took that further and I said, okay, now that I have all this money, what else can I do? And then I found, this Dave Johnson and what he's doing with the plants, and realized, wait a second, you can take and create living soil. Because what we've done, let me back up a little bit. What we've done with soil is 400 million years ago, the levels of CO2 in the atmosphere were so high that mammals could not exist. And so it was a major extinction event, and mammals could not survive. And what nature, there wasn't any people or any technology in order to deal with that. Nature solved that problem. And how nature solved that problem is plants use photosynthesis, and they take the carbon dioxide out of the air and they produce carbon from that. What most people don't understand, and what David Johnson was able to figure out, is that a key component of that is fungi. And the fungi in the soil is what helps to keep that carbon in the soil. Plants put it in the soil, but if you just have plants and you till them and you have bare soil, all of that carbon dioxide comes back out of the soil and back into the atmosphere. So you have no net accumulation of carbon in the soil. But that's not what happened. What happened was that the plants with the fungi were able to take that carbon dioxide out of the air, substantially, reduce the amount. I think it was like 1,000 or more parts per million or whatever it was, and now we're down to way lower than that. And all of that carbon went into the soil and became oil and coal and gas. And what do? We come along and take out the oil, the coal, and the gas, and we burn it, and we put the carbon dioxide back in the air. And then we take our crops that were our land that was taking carbon dioxide out of the air, and we basically tilled it and put chemicals in it and killed all the fungi. And so now we don't have a situation where carbon dioxide is being taken out of the air in these fields. And there's like 4.5 billion acres of cropland around the world. So that's a lot of area that is not putting carbon into the ground. And so we looked at it, and from the information that David Johnson has done, about 30 acres are necessary to remove a ton of CO2 every day with these methods. And you take that and you go out, you want to get gigatons or megatons of carbon dioxide taken out of the air. And we figured out that converting about 10% of the cropland in the world to these methods would basically solve the climate change problem. And that needs to be along with things like Tesla, reducing the amount of carbon dioxide put into the air. You can't just remove it from the air. You have to stop putting it in the air as well. So, but combine those two things would solve climate change. So that was huge. So that's what I've been working on and how to do that. And the website, it's a good website, but keep in mind that basically I started up this effort and I needed a website, and I put that website together in one night. And
Really?
it's a pretty good website. It has lots of information, but I'm working now with a consultant who is developing, next version of the website, which we anticipate going online this month. And that'll have a lot more information, and it'll be a lot easier to move around and get to things. And then we have a whole, so I basically copied what Tesla does, right? I mean, Tesla's such a good example. Why not copy it? So Tesla's mission is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. Our mission is to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable agriculture. I changed one word, but it fits and it works. And so we're following that, and we expect to have the same or similar type of objections. When EVs were coming on and people just laughed at it and said, no, that's not going to work. We expect the same thing. We expect people to say, no, it's not going to work. Then we're going to have oil companies that are now making lots of money off of taking oil and making fertilizer and other chemicals that are used in agriculture. They're going to be against it, and they're going to say, no, that's not going to work. So we're going to have the same type of attacks that Tesla faced, basically. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting, and it's a real big challenge. So we came up, the other thing we did was we came up with what I call our master plan part 1, similar to what Tesla did in their master plan part 1. Our master plan part 1 gets us to about April of next year. And so we have these things that we're doing in order to compete for the Carbon Removal X Prize that's funded by Elon through the X Prize program. And the winner of this first phase would get $1 million to further their work in the area. So we hope to win that. And I think there's 15 that will be getting that $1 million prize. To accomplish that, we've done a number of things. We've used technology. We recognize that in order to spread this worldwide, we can't do it by one person talking to another and going that way. So we said, okay, we need to do this through the internet. And how can we best do it through the internet? Well, we need, you could do YouTube videos, but then people would have to watch like hours of YouTube videos in order to get the information they need. So we found Storyfile. And storyfile.com is a way to have an interview done, and then a person on the internet can just ask a question of this story file, and the answer will pop up in a video with the person telling the answer, which is huge. So a month or so ago, we did interviews with 5 experts in the field, and we're going to have that launching before the end of the year. We'll have it launching and available to people. And if people are interested in it, I'm not sure if it's live yet, but William Shatner did a story file about his life and Star Trek and everything. and that's supposed to be coming online soon if it's not online already. So it's a pretty big deal. It's cool.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. I need to look into that. I've never heard of it before. But
Yeah.
yeah, this is great. So it sounds like you're obviously actively involved. Is this something you're kind of working on every day, sort of thing, or?
Oh yeah. It's yeah, it's basically a full-time job, as well as investing in Tesla, as well as doing other things. Like right now, I'm helping my son build a cabin. So yeah, I have lots of things going on.
Yeah,
But lots of people, when they get to my point in life, they think, well, I need to retire and just kind of travel a little bit. Yeah, okay, well, that's not working out so well for me, and it's not something that I want to do traveling, but right now you can't travel very much, so
yeah,
I'm just working.
yeah. It's great. So, are you confident in being one of the top teams for the X Prize, and kind of like what's the progress there and the timelines, right? Because
Yeah. So the first phase I told you about, next April, they're going to announce the 15 $1 million winners. And
yeah,
then the next leg of that is in 2025. And at that point in time, the successful applicants will have had to have removed 1,000 metric tons of CO2 from the air in a 1 year period. So they're not just, okay, how are you going to do this and asking questions and, theorizing and all that stuff. They actually will make sure that your method removed 1,000 metric tons of CO2. And so we're embarking on what we call a trial, basically to demonstrate that. And we're going to have 4 farms throughout the United States. And I'm expecting that each one of those farms will be able to pull 1,000 metric tons of CO2 out of the air and put it into the ground. And so, that'll be huge. The other thing that Tesla or that X Prize is focusing on is how much is the cost of this? How much does it cost to take the carbon dioxide out of the air and keep it in the ground? And this is actually a negative cost, because by using these methods, the farmers do not need to buy chemical fertilizers. They don't need to buy chemical pesticides or herbicides. The nature and the diverse nature associated with the living soils takes care of all that and pulls what the plants need right out of the soil. And so they can make a whole lot more money. So it actually has a negative cost. Everything else that I've seen for carbon removal has a cost, that you have to build a facility, you have to build something, you have to do something, and maybe you get some return, but it still has a cost. This is the only one that I've seen that does not have a cost. It has a negative cost associated with it. So I think we have a very good chance of winning the X Prize. And that X Prize, the largest one is $50 million. And our part 2 of our master plan would be to take that $50 million and spread what we're doing worldwide. And another part of that is kind of interesting. Actually, 2 more parts of that. One has to do with Tesla, and one has to do with Palantir. And so with Tesla, since Elon is funding this, he's going to be interested in, once we show him this and he understands what we're doing, he's going to be interested in helping out. And one of the things we want to do is to be able to have people log on and have access to a digital farm advisor, somebody that can take all the information on the internet, take all the information about the specific farm and fields that the person has, and give them suggestions on how they can create living soils on their property and make this work and save money. And so that requires a lot of AI, and Tesla with Dojo would be able to help us with that. And Palantir, with their looking at AI at the edge and analyzing data, will be able to help us in doing that as well. So I'm hoping that at that point in time, when we win the X Prize, we have $50 million to take this worldwide, and we have the support of Tesla, and we have the support, hopefully, of Palantir, that then we could really fly with this and make that digital farm advisor a reality for around the world. And that's not just in the United States with English, that's like translating it to different cultures and different languages, all of which requires effort, but is all possible with that venue and with that approach. So it's pretty exciting.
yeah, yeah. That's amazing. I love that plan. So it sounds like the 2 pieces beyond, of course, winning the X Prize, right, is you said Dojo. So are you expecting Dojo as a service to be kind of available by that point?
Yeah, for definitely. That's 2025. So Dojo will be up and running. And even if it isn't broadly available as a service, we're hoping that because we win the X Prize and because Elon is funding the X Prize, that he'll have an interest in helping to make this a reality
Yeah.
and spread it worldwide. So even
Yeah.
if it isn't available to everybody, we're hoping it would be available to our effort.
So then for the Palantir side of things, you think this will be a big enough story that you'll be able to use, kind of work something out with Palantir then?
Yeah, so already they have on their websites, they have something that says, hey, if you're interested in using Palantir for your startup or for your company, let us know. And so
Yeah.
I submitted something and said, here's what we're doing. We're trying to take carbon dioxide out of the air and put it in the ground. We need to have a digital farm advisor. Your AI at the edge would be fantastic to be able to implement that digital farm advisor.
That's amazing. When did you send that in?
It was probably a week and a half
Recently,
ago
or
or so, 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
have you heard anything back?
No, not yet. I do lots of things where I
Yeah.
put things out there. I figure if you don't ask, you never get. And so, ask. And if there are more avenues that come up where I can ask further or get further into Palantir to ask somebody higher up, then that would be great.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Well, I don't think that's the end of it. If it's only been a week, I know they're very
Yeah.
busy. They don't respond to my anything. Then I will
Yeah.
ask a question, and they will not respond. But
Yeah, the other thing that I found interesting was within that, I filled out answered the questions that they wanted, and then they said, "What area of business or whatever are you in?" And they had this whole list of about 15 or 20 of them, and agriculture was not any place on that list. And so I put down other and said agriculture, and I said, hey, this is a good opportunity for you guys to get involved in agriculture, which is a field you haven't been involved in. So hopefully that'll have some appeal to them and interest.
yeah, yeah, certainly. Well, that would be something. So, what about you think Dojo kind of tying in with Palantir, or would that be with Foundry, or would you be using them
Yeah,
separately?
I don't know exactly how that would work, but it seems like they could all work together because Dojo is for training AI. And basically, Palantir is using AI to get information at the edge and deal with it. And so it seems like those two should be able to work together. I don't know the details enough to know how, but it
Yeah,
seems like they should be able to.
yeah, yeah. Great stuff. That's very exciting. I hope everyone was paying attention and hearing that. Are you so like obviously you're funding this, right? And you're hoping for the X Prize funding as well. But do you have any crowdfunding or anything like that for your project here?
Yeah, we're working on that. At first I was kind of just going to fund it myself, and then the study got to be pretty big, and we're doing 4 sites, and we're doing all these technical analyses and data over a 3 to 5 year period. And so this study has gotten up to be like 10 or $12 million now.
Oh wow.
And I said, okay, well, maybe we want to get some other people helping to fund this as well. So we will be doing kind of a fundraising type of an approach, and we're going. We have a team working on that specifically, and we'll be looking at people that are interested in solving the climate change problem, like interested in agriculture, and hitting them up for some funding to help do this. And one of the ones that's interesting is some of the people on our team actually have connections with Kimball Musk, the brother of Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And most people, understand that Kimball is involved with food and agriculture and restaurants, and so this is kind of right up his alley.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, that's great. It's very exciting to hear about.
Yeah. And a couple of other points I wanted to make is one is that these farming methods take carbon dioxide out of the air and they put the carbon in the ground, and it'll stay in the ground as long as you don't revert back to tilling the ground. If you start tilling the ground, then the carbon will come out again. But the methods include as inoculant. Basically, you build a bioreactor that costs $50 to $100 to build. You put materials in it like dried leaves and dried grass, and you keep it moist for a year, and you get this rich, diverse set of bacteria and fungi that helps your plants grow. So you then inoculate the seeds with it, and the roots of the seeds work with this bacteria and fungi in order to make the plants better and provide the nutrients that the plants need. And then another part of this method is you need to have a variety of plants. And so we are saying you need to use multi-species cover crops and grow those crops and not till them into the ground, not harvest them, but just roll them down so that they provide a mat of vegetation on the surface. And then you plant through that with a no-till drill. You plant the seeds for your cash crop. You grow your cash crop and harvest that, and you get a lot better yields, and you don't have any runoff or very little runoff because you don't have bare soil. You have plants, and the soil has a structure associated with it that will absorb water like 5 times as much water. It's amazing. And you don't get runoff. You don't get pollution from the chemicals that you're using for fertilizing and pesticides and herbicides. And on top of all of that, the food quality is much better. Over the last 40, 50, 60 years, the amount of nutrient density in food has gone down half of what it was in World War II time period. And that's because of the farming methods. By going back to a living soil, the food will be much healthier. So everybody wins with this. The farmers have more abundance. They are getting better profits. There's less pollution. We're taking carbon dioxide out of the air and putting it in the ground. The food quality is better. It's just a win for everybody.
So if this is such a good solution as it sounds, right? There's so many benefits to it. Why hasn't it really been done yet, would you say?
Yeah, so the reason it hasn't been done yet and why we're able to move it forward now is because the technology has advanced to the point where we can better understand this. Because what we're talking about here is not things that you physically see. We're talking about microscopic bacteria and fungi that are working in the soil. Well, that's something that science has only recently developed. And for example, in your human biome, people are now recognizing, some people don't have a clue, but a lot of people are recognizing that the bacteria in your gut, in your mouth, in your nose, on your skin, that bacteria is critical to you surviving and thriving as a human being. And without that bacteria, you would not do well at all. That bacteria is what gives you an immune system. It's what converts from one, mineral to a food source that your body can use. There are just so many things that those microbes use. And so there's been lots of studies associated with the human biome. And now we're taking that ability and that ability to study it and understand it, and we're applying that to living soils. And it's amazing what we're finding.
Yeah. Well, you are very knowledgeable on this. And it really seems like, as with your investments, you're taking the first principles approach, right? As Elon always says. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. It looked like Tom Nash was joining us. Thanks for popping in, Tom. So if we could, wrap up the idea about the Tesla and now Palantir, and you said BioNTech investments. Are those your 3 kind of holdings, or what's the deal?
Yeah, those are the 3 biggest. And just to be straightforward, Tesla is 99%, and the BioNTech and the Palantir make up part of the 1%. So,
okay. Yeah.
But I think all of them have similarities, and those similarities are associated with. Can you hear the sawing in the background?
A little bit, but you're coming through fine.
It's not too bad. Okay. But all of them are looking at using AI in order to solve real problems. Yes. And BioNTech is using AI to solve medical and health issues. And Palantir is using it to take data from around the world in internet and solve problems. And Tesla's using the AI to solve full self-driving. So
Yeah.
it's pretty incredible. And soon, the next few years, probably also a Tesla bot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. It seems like you kind of come up with this thesis, right? And that's the basis of the investment, and you're kind of waiting for that to come to fruition, right? And it just happens to be that some of that is kind of a digital artificial intelligence backbone, or are you specifically seeking out these themes, or would you
Yeah,
say?
well, at first it was, like I said, with Tesla, it was looking at EVs and full self-driving. And then I
Mhm.
realized that what was key with that full self-driving, for example, was AI. And then, Kathy Wood and ARK Invest, they talk a lot about AI and how important that is. And one of the things that amazes me and hasn't happened yet, but will happen, I'm 100% sure, is that over time, and this is what Kathy Wood says, is that about 40–50% of the S&P 500 will be disrupted by the other 40 or 50% and newcomers that are using AI. So that basically the companies that aren't using AI will be disrupted by the ones that are using AI. And what will happen in my mind that is so amazing with that is not only will that be a huge benefit to the world, but investors will be rotating out of half of the S&P 500 and rotating into high value AI based stocks. And so I
Yeah.
look at this and I say Tesla, top of the list, Palantir, top of the list, BioNTech, top of the list. They're all using AI to solve real problems and real issues.
Yeah. So what does that mean then for the S&P 500? If you have companies getting rotated out, right, and new ones getting rotated in, does that do anything to the performance, would you say?
Yeah, yeah. Well, first of all, if you're investing in a index fund that's indexed to the 500 S&P 500, that could be pretty risky because there will be times when half of it's going down, and the index won't be doing well.
Mhm.
Then eventually, over time, that will be kind of self-correcting because the larger firms that are using AI will become dominant within the S&P 500, and so the S&P 500 will turn over and become higher value AI companies will form the backbone of the S&P 500, whereas now it's maybe 40 or 50%.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I know obviously indexes are one of the most popular and easiest kind of investments to get started with, and to think that obviously this disruption is coming for these incumbent companies, legacy, like all these companies that aren't really fully taking advantage of technology, that kind of they are, as you're saying, going to get ousted from the from leading in whatever industry they're in, right? But
Yep.
just kind of thinking about what impact that will have on the kind of the market as a whole is fairly interesting. So I was wondering
Yeah,
about
and
that.
then just looking at like these three stocks that I have, Tesla and Palantir and BioNTech, when all that money is rotating out of those non-AI stocks into the AI, that'll put tremendous pressure on the value and the price of these stocks and drive it way up beyond what people can imagine.
Yeah, so that brings up an interesting point then, because I don't know much about BioNTech, but Tesla and Palantir are constantly called overvalued, right? And that's a matter of interpretation and belief on what the true value is, right? But do you think, yeah, like what do you think if the stocks double, triple, like keep moving, like what is going to be said? Is there's just going to have to be kind of a rewriting, a reevaluation of these companies, then, right?
Yeah, when I look out for Tesla out into the future, people ask me, well, what's Tesla going to be worth in 2030? And I have absolutely no idea what it'll be worth in 2030. 2030 is way too far out because of the rate of change that we're seeing. I can look
Mhm.
out and see in 5 years that Tesla stock could easily be worth $10,000 a share. And people just say, Bruce, you're absolutely crazy. And I said, yeah, probably. But there's greater than a zero chance that that'll happen, and the demand will be there. And some people say, well, the demand for EVs is not there. Well, it's not there right now because there's not a $25,000 car that's cheaper than buying an ICE car. As soon as that happens, the whole thing is just going to turn over, and you're going to see ICE vehicles basically fall off a cliff as far as sales go, because nobody will want to buy one. They won't yet be able to buy an EV because there won't be that many available, but they won't want to buy an ICE vehicle either because they know that the value is going to go down, and basically you're going to hold on to an ICE vehicle. If it's a new ICE vehicle, the value is dropping dramatically. Well, you buy a Tesla, and like I bought the Tesla in 2018, it's worth more now today than it was when I bought it.
Really?
How many ICE vehicles do you know you can have that situation with?
Well, what I was getting at, I think, is if you have the rotation out of some companies into these more innovative ones, right, and that push the valuations higher when a lot of people already call them overvalued. I'm just wondering if there's going to really have to be a real reevaluation, or if you actually think the earnings are going to be behind it, like the fundamentals are going to be driving this shift or not. I guess
I'm not really so much of a fundamentals person, but I follow it and I see what other people do. I'm more of a visionary, looking out at the future, what's going to happen, and then investing in stocks based on that, and in the research, other research too. But I don't do like detailed financial models associated with earnings and EPS and all that. I let other people do that, take a look at it, and can kind of draw conclusions from it and adjust what they've done. But I do see with Tesla that their profits are going to go through the roof, because not only are they going to make probably 40% gross margin profits on their vehicles, they're going to have software that's more like 80 or 90%, with the full self-driving. 80 or 90% profit. And then they have the Tesla bot that's coming up after that. And that Tesla bot will just, you look at the TAM associated with the Tesla bot, it's basically all labor in the world and on Mars. And that's just a huge TAM. And while they're not going to overcome all of that, it's just a huge addressable market that they can work from. And the cost of producing that is fairly low, and it's more of a software type of a thing. And so it'll have margins that are, gross margins that are probably up in the 70-80% range, and it'll be a cash cow. So
yeah, but theoretically, right, there is a price at which you would sell, right? Like if Tesla stock was $25,000 today, with the current business, like, would you be selling the stock? I'm just trying to get a sense of like how you kind of like use the valuation. You're saying you obviously observe the valuations from like probably institutional, and like we have lots of retail community members who do their own sort of models, right? But because like you've been so successful here with Tesla, but if kind of the market just like I'm just saying, like if Tesla is $100,000 per share today, right? That's too much. Or
right. That would be too much.
But like, how do you kind of connect that? Like, if Palantir is $1,000 a share today, right? I wouldn't be an investor. Like, kind of like, what's your thought process with evaluation of a company?
So, yeah, it's interesting. People ask that of Kathy Wood too, and her response I thought was very appropriate. Is that if the price was that much higher now, and there wasn't a change in any of the fundamentals that we see, yeah, they make sense to sell. But the price won't be that much higher unless the background situation changes.
Mm-hmm.
And if it changes, then it's probably going to justify a higher price. So I really don't see a point where I would expect to sell Tesla or Palantir for that matter, unless Palantir or Tesla, if Elon or, the CEO of Palantir gets hit by a bus and, somebody else, messes things up, maybe then I'd look at selling it. But short of that type of an event, I would just be holding both.
Yeah. Let's hope not. But yeah, so well, what we've seen in recent times with Tesla, and no doubt this is coming for Palantir, is the stock starts to rise and it just keeps going. But what we see and what kind of accelerates the rise of the stock is the analyst upgrades. And what I find hilarious about the analyst upgrades is no one wants to put out a target that's kind of like way beyond the current stock price.
Right.
So if the stock rises past your target, all of a sudden you have to put out a new target. And like you it seems like all the institutional analysts want to pretty much have just a market price on the stock. So when the stock moves, like the analyst upgrades increase, which yeah, I think just is a funny kind of
Yeah,
uh,
it's pretty ridiculous actually, because like you said, the analysts will look at it and they'll say, "Huh, okay, the stock went up to this amount. Okay, what can I do to adjust my market so my price target? So I want to keep it a little bit above where it is, and what do I need to adjust?" And so they add some more vehicles in, they add some more profit in. Oh, okay, that got me a little bit above. Okay, we'll go with that.
yeah.
And some of the analysts want to be below, and they'll just basically back in the data so that it shows what they want to show. It's totally ridiculous.
Yeah. And well, then you have someone like Kathy Wood or I don't know,
Yeah,
like Warren Redlick or someone that will actually kind of model the numbers that they actually believe. They're not looking at what can I do to the numbers to get this stock price, right? Which I
yeah,
think is much more respectable, as wrong as they possibly could be. I think that's much more helpful than an institutional analyst saying, let's use half of Tesla's target growth rate, right? So that
right.
actually generates a number that makes sense so we don't get laughed at. It's just funny. And I think
Yeah,
that provides an opportunity, right, for these companies that are disruptive, high growth names that will kind of, I don't know, it's not a short squeeze. I mean, it could create a gamma squeeze as we've seen and will see per the prediction with Tesla. But yeah, some serious upward pressure.
yeah.
So
So what I get a kick out of is people like ARK Invest and another and myself. We look at Tesla and we see the great potential that they have and where it can go, and that's the basis for our investment. And like a month ago, I was maintaining that Tesla could be above $2,000 a share in March.
yeah.
Almost everybody on Tesla thought on Twitter thought I was crazy. No, it's no way you can get to 2,000. And now it's like everybody's saying, "Oh yeah, 2,000, 2,500 by March. Yeah, that seems reasonable." It's just what I've done is just hold on to that basic concept of EVs are going to replace ICE vehicles faster than anybody expects. Full self-driving is going to replace manual driving faster than anybody can expect, and that's going to just drive the price of Tesla through the roof.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's very interesting because it's more of kind of this is my thesis, and then you say you don't want to or you wouldn't sell, but theoretically, if a thesis of a stock is achieved, right, and you no longer see any upside, is that the point where you would kind of transition away from a given stock?
Yeah, it could be. Right now, my plan, as far as I see, with Tesla going and going from, the EV to full self-driving to a Tesla bot, I'm just looking at it and saying, yeah, I probably will never sell the stock. I'll pass it on to my kids or to a foundation or something, but I will never sell it.
Yeah, yeah. Amazing. Well, it's been great hearing all of this from you. Very educational. Awesome to get your points of view on Tesla and Palantir, and I think only only great stuff ahead of us
Yeah,
for
yeah.
Tesla,
Next week,
right?
next week will be really exciting, actually, and I'm looking forward to it. I was talking to tweeting back and forth with somebody about this, and I was saying, one thing that's really important is that you not be stressed out and you not worry about things. If people are stressed out and worried about things, then that's not good for your health. And so, if you're
Yeah,
getting into that area, you should get away from it.
yeah,
But on the other hand, what I look at these things is I look at them as being exciting opportunities, exciting events, and that excitement is actually really good for longevity and for your health. And so I like to have a lot of excitement in my life, And one of the things that does that is like looking at this gamma squeeze and what could that do, and how can I make that work in my benefit and help bring about positive change for the world.
Yeah. So I saw someone asking in the live chat before how you sleep with margin calls or whatever, right? So like obviously, I think you have enough wealth at this point. I'm just guessing that even losing a portion of it, as with these sort of speculative call options, that would be fine, a certain percentage, right? But how do you sort of just think about the risk you're taking on your portfolio? And is there, do you think you have a unique mindset there, or it's just I have so much experience with these sorts of mechanisms and I feel very confident? Is it just conviction, or what is it really?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all of that. It's, all the research that I've done, it's the developing of intuition that, I can use to apply to the stock and apply to what's going on around the world. But it's also kind of a mindset, and that is, I'm not doing this for myself. I'm not, trying to increase my wealth so that I can buy a yacht or buy a huge mansion or something like that. I'm doing this to improve the world and make the world a better place for 8 billion people worldwide. And that allows me to just kind of detach from these things and, okay, this is what I think can happen if I do this. And it's based on all my research and my intuition. And I think this is a very high likelihood of happening. And so I'm going to do it. And that's how I got into the gamma squeeze thing. That's how I got into Tesla stock. That's how I got into options, is from that mindset.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. Well, very last thing I wanted to ask if you saw this tweet of Elon, where he was getting sort of requested to, let's see, right here, um, getting asked if he would, or this was just CNN saying 2% of Elon's wealth could solve world hunger, right? We're talking about doing good for the world, solving all these problems. And he says, if the World Food Program, and this is actually, I think Palantir works with them, we've seen that before, so just a little connection there, can describe on this Twitter thread exactly how $6 billion will solve world hunger, I will sell Tesla stock right now and do it. But it has to be open source accounting so the public can see precisely how much money is spent. So what do you think about that? And had you seen this 4 hours ago, it looks like.
No, I hadn't seen that one. That fits with Elon though, and his approach to things is he wants to solve world problems, and if he sees a solution, he'll help. For example, with his carbon removal, he said, "I'm putting up $100 million for this X Prize for carbon removal. If there is a need for more money for carbon removal, and there are some good things that can be done, cost effectively to do carbon removal, I'll put more money out."
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just the way he rolls. He wants to solve world problems, and if he sees a solution and that it'll work, he'll support it.
Yeah. Well, I think you're kind of using that principle as well of generating wealth through stock. And I mean, Elon can't really, well, he is getting the options too, right? I guess that's just
He gets a different kind of options, but he does get options as well.
Yeah. But anyway, obviously his goal all along has been to bring this in to make sure SpaceX can actually create the Mars colony, which is the ultimate sort of good for the world, in that it provides the obviously the backup for everyone on Earth and making life multiplanetary. So I think it's really amazing to see that you are doing something very in a similar model, as you're saying, kind of using the mission statement, kind of building your wealth and creating that. It's really great to see.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I love about the Tesla community, especially on Twitter, is that most people who invested in Tesla, like myself, we invested in Tesla not because we were just out to make money. We invested in Tesla because we liked what Tesla was doing, and we saw it as an opportunity to make money. But the first thing was we liked what Tesla was doing. and so you get a lot of Teslaonaires who have made millions of dollars on Tesla, and that's like a flywheel effect. Basically, is Elon does this stuff with Tesla stock goes way up, people become Teslaonaires, they have more money, they then in turn do things to make the world better, and it just snowballs into a whole huge group of people that are helping to make the world better.
Yeah, it's great. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you so much for joining me today, Bruce. Any final words? I will, of course, let you plug anything. I mean, we talked about, I would assume that's your biggest project, and then
Yeah,
just,
I think it's basically stay tuned for what's going to come from healthy soil biomes, and we're working with a large group. We're actually trying to form, and this is something I realized when the carbon removal X Prize rules were about to be announced, is in order to win this, we need to have an alliance. It can't just be us. It needs to be everybody that's interested in and focusing on the biology and soil, working together to make this happen worldwide. And so we're aiming our website and all of our efforts to, making that alliance a reality and joining everybody together to improve the world through agriculture.
do you have a newsletter of any kind, or are you sort of disseminating any public information through your Twitter account, or what's the deal?
I tweet things every once in a while, but the main effort that we're doing right now is to get this website up and running, the new website with the new features that we have with story file. We're also going to have a computer game, a video game, that basically in order to win the game, you have to understand what happens with the soil biology, and you're going to start off with a farm that you inherited and it's really bad soils, and then you do these things in order to make the soils better and increase your profits and all that. So that's going to be a fun game for people to do. And then we're going to have a video that shows how all this works at a microbiology level, looking at the microscopic aspects of what's going on, just so people can have a better understanding. And then we're working on the Farm Advisor. The Farm Advisor, Digital Farm Advisor, is a longer term thing. It's going to take several years to get to that point. We're hoping that we'll have it up and running for the X Prize in 2025. So
Yeah,
it's exciting.
yeah.
Keep track of what we're doing on our website, and you'll be hearing more from us.
Amazing. Well, best of luck.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me on.
Thank you so much for joining me. Take
All
care,
right.
Bruce.
Bye-bye.